Hey, what's going on guys? Kenju here and welcome to another tutorial video on Roblox Studio. In this video I'll be going over the Fix plugin F3X, the building tools that I use for basically all my builds, and there's quite a bit of stuff here, but I'm gonna try to be as fast as possible for you guys. So yeah, bear with the time, it's fine. You'll learn everything by the end of this. It's gonna be pretty basic. I'm not gonna go over complicated stuff, but I'm gonna go over every single item on this list, so that way you get, the basics of Fix out of the way, because that's what you need to actually start gaining more experience building. So first off, we have the selection tool. Let me just put a part. If you want to select a part, all you have to do is put your mouse over it and click. That's all you need. And if you want to drag it, you can either drag it with these buttons, the circles, or you can hold it and drag it like this. Now if you want to drag it from here to there, doing this takes more time than just doing this, so keep that in mind. Now if you want to select more than one item, for example 3 items, you can either hold shift, I'm holding shift right now, and click on the items at the same time. You can move them that way, you can drag them this way, or if there's a lot of stuff and you don't feel like clicking, you can just hold the left click and just select them like so. But the thing is, I don't recommend selecting a lot of items. For example, if there's like a whole city here, try not to select everything because it's gonna lag your Fix plugin and that's not gonna go well. It could crash your game. So I recommend selecting one at a time, like one building at a time, for example, just in case if your game crashes and you lose all the progress. So that's for the selection tool. Now let's move on to the moving tool. Okay, so on the moving tool we have the increment. That is basically the number of spaces that it goes. Like for example, the increment is 1, so it will move 1 stud. This is basically 1 stud. This is the basic base plate of Roblox that you get when you start up Roblox Studio in this map, and every square is an increment, 1 increment. And since the increment here is 1, it will move 1 square at a time, any side you want. Even when you drag it, it will move 1 at a time. And this goes for every building, even in this big one. If I just drag it like this, it keeps going 1. And as you can see, if I move it more than 1, it will say right here that I moved it 16 studs. That's to like if you like move something out of the way for a second and you want to put it back to where it was exactly, it says I moved it 22 studs. All I have to do is drag it back 22 studs, and there we go, it's back where it was. Okay, so that's useful for stuff like that because I've done that before and it was pretty helpful for me. Now here we have global, local, and last. These are the axes for the part. So for example, global is basically is the global movement. So if you have an item that is rotated, for example, rotated this way, okay, the global would make it move just like any other object. So if this object is here, it will have the global axis. These are the axes, the buttons, and it will have the same movement range. But if I go on local, it will change. It will make it so that it can move up and down just like so. It changes the axis of the buttons. That way it can move to spots. Now this is useful, for example, if you're making a roof on a house, right? So you're over here making a roof on a house and you're rotating this. So here's the roof, and you want to add another layer on the roof. Instead of copying it and doing this, which isn't that good because look, it will have like one part there, and it's just gonna be a bit harder than just to press local. Okay, you press local, and then you can just move it like that, and there it's directly on top of it. So that's why it's important to use the axis the right way. It can be very helpful at times, and it's really good to know. Most tutorials don't cover these stuff. but I'm gonna try to cover as much as possible with the shortest amount of time as possible. Now we have the last option here. Now most people think the last option is the same as local, but that's not the case. For example, if I click 1, 2, 3, the last thing that I clicked is this one, and you can see that this one isn't rotated, right? So the last button that I clicked, the last brick, is the one that's gonna move the entire thing. It's gonna change the axis for the entire thing. As you can see, this rotated button, like this rotated brick, it moves the same way in the same axis as the last. But if I click 1, 2, 3, as you can see, the last is this one because I clicked this one last, so it moves the whole part, 3 bricks, the same way this moves with its axis. Now this can be useful at times as well. You can invent a use for it, but like it's pretty useful to know because some people confuse these to be the same thing, but they're not. This one's for the last, and you know the other one. I'm not gonna go over that too much. And now for the increment, if you want to change the increment, because if you want to get really good in detail, then you can move it to 0.1, which can make it move even lower than 1 stud at a time. For example, if you want to make a small gap in between, you can just do that. And there you go, you have a small gap instead of 1 whole stud, which is pretty big. And you can also go even smaller, 0.01, which can make an even smaller gap if you want to even go into more detail. But I recommend for beginners to go on 0.1, because 0.01 and 0.001 is like a bit too much, you know. I don't recommend doing this unless you're really experienced. Even I don't do it, and I've been building for quite a while now. So that's for the increment. You can change it as much as you want, depending on the detail you want and the size of your build. Now that's it for the moving tool. Now the other tools are basically similar, you know, but it's basically the same thing: axis and increment and the movement. But this movement thing is gonna change. For example, if you go here and you look at the X, this is the resize tool. You click it, or you can just click X. Oh, I forgot to mention that they have hotkeys as well. You see on the top left of each button, there's a key, you know, a key number. For example, this is X, this is Z, this is X, C, V. So if I want to move something, I press Z on my keyboard, and it changes to the moving tool. Okay. If I want to scale something and make it bigger, I press X. This is to make things faster than just to click on here, and if I want to move it, I go all the way back. I can just, you know, memorize the hotkeys and do it faster without going all the way there. It saves a lot of time, and it's very helpful to know the hotkeys for every button. So just keep practicing until you get to know them. Now let's go for the scaling tool, the resize. For the direction, you can either resize normally, which goes in one direction at a time, or you can resize both. Both is the 2 axes, this axis and this axis. So if I resize from this, the other part will get resized as well. And even on the bottom, every single axis, it gets resized both, okay? The increment is the same as the other one. If you want to get in more detail, 0.1. And this is the size. For example, if you want to make a perfect square, right? All you have to do is change everything to the same number. And there you have a perfect cube, not square. I'm pretty bad in geometry, but whatever. So here we have a perfect cube, alright? So now that we have a cube here, you can resize it wherever you want. Just keep in mind, if you want a perfect square, cube, then just put the same number on every part. And yeah, that's it for the scaling, I believe. Now let's move on to the rotation tool, the rotate. Now, as you can see, the axes are basically the same. Global is center, local last. Now center is basically global, right? You can move it this way, you can move it this way. You can move it that way. You know, you can just rotate it to wherever position you want it to be. Local is the axes move with it because it's rotating while the axes move. So if I rotate it like this, the axes rotate with it, you know? So the axes rotate as well. So if you wanna, for example, rotate it like this, then rotate that, as you can see, the whole thing moves at the same time. So you can do more rotations than the center one. Now for the last, it's basically the same thing as the moving tool. For example, if this is rotated like this, and you selected 1, 2, 3, everyone's gonna rotate the same way, you know, they have the same axis. But if you click it 1, 2, 3 like this, it's gonna have the same axis as this one. So that's for the last, okay? Keep that in mind. But I've never used this last for the rotate tool because I see no use for it. But if there ever is a use for it for you, then you know how to use it. Now for the increment on the rotating tool, it's 15 by default, but you can change it to 5 if you want to do more precise rotations. You can also put it to 1 if you want it even more precise, but I keep it at 15 unless I want to do something smaller. Then I can go with 5, but 5 is the lowest I'm gonna go with. But you can go lower. I'm just saying that 5 is good for basically almost everything. So yeah, that's it for the rotate tool. Let's move on to the paint tool. As you can see, we have a lot of colors, but there's even more colors beyond that. So for example, if I want to color this red, but I find that this red is too red for me, right? And there's not the red that I want in this pile of reds, right? I can click this button right here, and I can change the shade of the red, the saturation of the red, 51%, well, not money, okay, percent, where's the percent? There it is, 51%, oops. Like you can play with these and just, you know, find the color you want. If I want it darker, I'll just go darker. Oh, it's not doing it, okay, there. I'll just go darker if I want it darker. I didn't select it. I can go lighter, darker. I can change colors to whatever color I want, and that's basically it for the painting tool. Nothing too complicated about it. You can choose any color you want, which is perfect for building in any style. Now we're gonna go over to the surface tool. As you can see, the surface tool has sides and the type. For the types, you can put it smooth, wheeled, whatever you want, you know, but I don't usually mess with this. I just keep it on smooth, the default one, which is probably smooth. Yep, it's smooth. I just keep it on smooth. But if you want to play with that, go ahead, you know, do whatever you want. But I don't really care about this that much, honestly. So we're just gonna go ahead and skip that. There's nothing really interesting about it, unless you want to glue something together or whatever. Let's go with the material tool. This is interesting. This is I can't even speak. This is the interesting part, okay? Because if you want to build like a pathway, then you don't want the plastic pathway, you know, that's not realistic and that won't look that good. So you're gonna change it to slate or concrete or something like cobblestone, you know. This will change the material of it. And you click N for it. There's also transparency. For example, if you want to make glass, okay, there's a glass material and you want to make glass, see how it glows, but you can't see through it, you know. And in real life you can see through, you can like see through glass here, right? So you can just change the transparency. Look, the closer it is to 1, the more transparent it will be. So if I put 1, it's gonna be completely invisible. Okay, now there's just an invisible block here. But if I put 0.9, you can still see a faint side of it, but not completely. And if it's 0, then it's completely non-transparent. So the closer it is to 1, the more transparent it will be. That's just on your personal preference of how transparent you want your objects to be. It works on everything, not just glass. As you can see here, it works basically on everything. So now the reflectance, if you want it to reflect and be like, I don't know, a mirror, you can see the sky up above. Then you put it to 1 if you want it to be slightly reflective, but not all the way. You put it like in between. And the closer it is to 0, the more non-reflecting it will be. The closer to 1, 1 is completely reflected, you know? You can just play around with that and try to guess what you want, you know? Now let's move on to the anchor tools. Now the anchor tools is basically the floating parts. Now if you're making a flying city, for example, let's just say that, and your city, when you play the game, falls, it's because it's not anchored. I'm gonna show you the difference between anchoring an object and having an object and unanchored, you know? So this object is gonna be unanchored and this one's gonna be anchored. And I'm gonna go in game and show you the difference. Let me put a spawn here actually. Boom. I'll go over the new parts later. As you can see, the unanchored part falls all the way down and the anchored part stays up. It's like locked in place. And you can actually move the unanchored part with your Roblox character if you ever want to move it, you know? But the unanchored part stays completely still, you know. This is anchored by default. You can't even move it with your Roblox character, but with this one you can actually move it. It's a bit harder because this is a pretty big block, but if it's a smaller block I can move it easily with my Roblox character. So basically, yeah, that's for the anchoring tool. Let's go back to the studio. Alright, we're back in the studio. Let's anchor this bad boy again. Alright, there we go. Let's move it down. And let's move on to the next one, which is the collision tool. Now if you're making a door and you want people to go through the door and you don't want to spend too much time scripting it or doing like parts, you know, it's pretty complicated if you want a moving door. And since this is a beginner tutorial, we're just gonna go with this. But it doesn't have to be exclusively for doors. If you want to just make something like be able to go through, then you can have the K tool, which is the collision tool, open, and just click on an object and press collision off. Okay, or you can press enter, which changes it. When you press enter, it switches from on and off. So you can have the collision off. This one's gonna be off, and this one's gonna be on. I'm gonna go in game and show you what that does in a second. Alright, now that we're in game, this one's collision off, like the default, where you can't go through, and this one is with collision. As you can see, I can go right through it with no problem at all. Let's go back to the studio now. Alright, we're back in the studio, and let's move on with the new part tool. This is the most important tool because this is what you need to do at first to actually get a new part in the studio with Fix. Or you can just do right click and insert part, but you know, that's more steps. Just press J or click on here and click on the ground, left click, anywhere you want. So if you press J and click there, it will spawn there, you know. And there are multiple part types. You can get a truss, you can get a wedge, you can get anything. Spawn, if you want to spawn somewhere, as you can see I did earlier, I put a spawn here and I spawned there. You can just put a spawn. But always make sure whenever you put a spawn, you press J again and place a normal part, because I've done builds before that were made out of spawns because they look the same, the exact same, you know. And I was just building with this spawn part, and at the end of the game I just kept spawning everywhere because my whole build was made out of spawns. So always press J and make sure you have normal instead of spawn, so that way you don't build with spawns, which is very bad and you have to restart the whole thing all over again, you know. So make sure it's normal or whatever you want. If yeah, because when you put a spawn, and you press J again, as you can see it stays spawn. It stays spawn unless you change it back to normal. So once you change it back to normal, it will stay normal. So it's basically the same part unless you change it again. Keep that in mind, it's very important. Let's keep deleting stuff now. Remove all these. Now that's it for the new part tool. Let's move on to the mesh tool. Now a mesh is basically another object other than the part. So if you have this block right here, right? You're sizing it and stuff, and oops, you change your mind. You don't want a block. You want a cylinder, right? What you can do is press H, and you can make it into a mesh. It will start off as the head, but you can change it into a cylinder, a sphere, a wedge, anything you like. As you can see, you can just scale them, move them, rotate them, and it will basically act like a normal brick, but as a different object. And if you want a perfect sphere, just like you would do with a perfect square, all you have to do is put any number 3 times, 3 exact times, and there you go, a perfect sphere there. Now for the offset, as you see this blue box around it. This is the place where the character can't go unless you change the collision. If the collision is off, he can pass through it. If it's on, it's like any other brick. Okay, it's like this one. You can't go through the purple part and the object, okay? But the offset can change that. When you move and when you put it like to the side, you can cross through here, but you can't cross through there, and you can just move this around. I don't really use this for anything because I find it pretty useless, but I can think of uses to do this for, you know, a couple uses, but that will go along with your building journey. I'll let you decide what to do with that. Let's go in game and test this out. Alright, now that we're in game, as you can see, you can go through the head, but when you try to go through the invisible brick, because the brick is here, you can't go through it because it's basically like a part here. It's basically the same as this one. We just put the visible part to the side. That's basically it. Let's go back to the building studio. Alright, we're back in the building studio. Let's put this back. And let's move on to the texture tool. Now the texture tool is basically if you want to add any decals, images, or custom textures to your brick. Now I don't use this again because I use the normal ROBLOX textures, but you can use it if you ever need to put your own textures and decals on it. So you just do add decal, you put your image ID, which is basically the numbers at the end of your decal link, like the link, you know, the roblox.com/decal, and it's like at the end of the image link. You just put it here, and you can also change the transparency of it. So you can put it like 0.5. The closer it is to 1, the more transparent it will be, just like the normal brick. So that's for the texture, but I don't really use this honestly. I just put normal ROBLOX textures, but it can be useful at times. So basically the lighting tool is basically to add light to your game. Now as you can see, I made this little house of parts, and on the inside there is not that much light on the inside, so we're gonna fix that. This is gonna be my light source. I'm gonna press U or click on that, and I'm gonna put a point light. Now the point light points to one direction basically. I think it's one direction. No, I think it's the spotlight. Yep. Alright, so the spotlight points to one direction. It can be on the front, top. This is the top. This is the bottom. And you can tell what left is and right is, you know. So this is the left, right. Okay. So basically that's for the spotlight. And if you want to light something up, you just, for example, if you can put the light all the way over there and change the range. The range is basically how far the light is gonna go. This light goes from here all the way to over there. So basically that's how you change the range of the light. The max range is 60 and the lowest range is 1 or 0. But I don't know why you would put 0. There's no light at all. But like just put 1, you know. So basically that's it for the light. You can also change the brightness if you want it to be super bright. Then this is what it will look like. You can't even see anything, it's just too white, you know. So I don't recommend putting it super white. And you can also put shadows, which will put the ROBLOX shadows here. As you can see, it looks cooler. If you want to make a realistic game or any game you want with shadows, go ahead and do that. There's also the point light, which is basically just, I think it's a light on all directions. I believe that's the case. You can also change the color here. So if you want a red light, you can just change that and boom, the light is red. Same goes for this one. You can change the color as well, which is pretty cool if you're trying to make a disco game or whatever. And for the surface light, I can just add this. It's basically the same. You choose what, you know, place and color and range and the angle. If you want to angle the light 45 degrees, then it can get angled 35 degrees from the top or the bottom, or you can choose the rest. So that's it for the light. Let's go on to the decoration tool. Now for the decoration tool, you can add smoke, fire, or sparkles. You can add all three at once, it doesn't really matter. But here are the things for all of them. Let's remove them so we can see them one by one. For the smoke, you can change the color of the smoke. If you want red smoke, there you go. You can change the opacity. 1 is completely visible and 0 is completely invisible. Okay, so it goes from 1 to 0, and this will change how much you see of the smoke. Okay, now for the size, it will increase the smoke size. So if you want a big smoke, then here you go, and you can just increase that or decrease that wherever you want. Now for the velocity, it's like basically the speed of the smoke, you know. As you can see, the never mind, not the speed, it's how far the smoke goes. I think so. I'm not a smoke expert, I don't really use this that much, but you can just play with that and find out. For the fire, you can choose a color. So there's a color for the middle and the outside. You can change the color for here, and you can change the color for the other side, and you can just make colorful flames of whatever you want. The heat is basically how much it glows and how long it goes, and the size is the same as the smoke, you just change the size. There we go. So let's remove that and move on to the sparkles. Sparkles is the most simple one. You just change the color of the sparkles and there you go. You can have as many sparkles as you want. So if you want to undo stuff, let's go over the hotkeys that weren't mentioned. If you want to undo something, for example, you want to copy. Okay, let's copy it first. If you want to copy, you can do Shift C. When you do Shift C, it will copy it. Now, it's different from the ROBLOX stuff, because when you copy on ROBLOX, I think it goes on top of it, but when you copy on Fix, it goes inside of it. So if you click it once and Shift C, you have to move it outside of the part because it copies inside of the part. And now if you want to delete a part, you do Shift X. Shift X basically just deletes the part. Now if you want to undo the last part, if you're like, oh no, I deleted the wrong one, then you just do Shift Z. Shift Z undoes the last action you made and gets you back the part that you lost. Or you can also click these buttons here. You can see them here. Delete, export. This is if you want to export it to a file. This is to clone it. Shift C. And undo and redo. If you want to redo this, then you put Shift Y or Shift Z. Y, Z, you know. And that's basically it for the Fix tutorial. I hope this tutorial helped you guys learn a bit more about ROBLOX building. And if you have any more video ideas or more tutorials you want me to make, put them in the comment down below. I always check the comments and read them, so that will be really helpful for future video ideas. And guys, I'll see you in the next one. See ya.